Greetings one and all. Welcome Super Wednesdays. In the Holy Apple, the Holy Land, the Holy Hilltop here. We are on the 20th day of the month of Kislev. You got it right. Closing in 4.5 days away from the holiday of Hanukkah. Okay, today's class is titled Hanukkah. Why don't the good guys always win? Hanukkah, why don't the good guys always win? Give a short summary of our first class, which was titled The Fascinating Story of Hanukkah You've Never Heard. But sometimes people have allergies to part twos, so we give it a new title. Okay, a quick summary, here we go. Last time we spoke about the holiday of Hanukkah, year 135 BCE. Hanukkah is the kind of story that they lived happily ever after. The bad guys lose, the good guys win, the majority lose, the underdog wins. You know, it's kind of like Rocky. Bum 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 bum. Yeah. So it's a classic story. It's a win-win situation. On the other hand, we spoke about some 252 years later, in the year 117 CE, in Egypt, the wicked king Trajanus and his wife Pompella, she was instrumental in this decision to eliminate and destroy the Jewish people. The Jewish people were destroyed, and so was their Immaculate Synagogue. They had a synagogue that it was so gigantic, they had to put 6 flags. You know that amusement park, 6 Flags? Well, now you know where they stole that name also from the Jews. I've always tried to point these points out. What you think is something new in the non-Jewish world, it was taken from the Jewish world. So 6 Flags. Yeah, Magic Mountain or whatever. So you got it. The Jews were given, Trajan and his wife Pompella, they had a child on the 9th day of Av, and the Jews had to decide whether they were going to mourn or not, because the whole city was in a party mood after so many years that the king and queen did not have a child. So bad luck for the Jews. 4.5 months later, on the holiday of Hanukkah now, so they had to make a decision. Now what happened was that the son of Trajan and Pompella passed away. On the holiday of Hanukkah, the Jews had to make a decision whether to light candles or not. They decided that they were going to light candles. The men were totally executed and destroyed and eliminated. The entire community, the entire city of Jews, the biggest community of Jews at this time of the Second Temple, was wiped out. Afterwards, they asked the women what their decision was going to be. Would they light candles also? And they say, we're with the men. And they also killed the women, and they killed the children. So how is this possible that somebody that is about to perform a commandment, or is heading to perform a commandment, or is performing a commandment, something bad will come out of that? I mean, it's a paradox. It's a catch-22 situation. You're doing something good. You're doing God's will straight out. So how could bad things happen to a person that's doing a good thing? More so, the Talmud in a few places teaches us that if you're a messenger to do a commandment, nothing bad will happen to you. King Solomon, in his book of Kohelet 8:5, he writes there that somebody that performs a commandment, nothing bad will happen to them. The Talmud says that if a person performs a commandment from A to Z, from the beginning to the end, performs the commandment in a complete way, that nothing bad will happen to that person, and also that even if there's a decree for 70 years that could be eliminated, which is an amazing thing. There's a decree by God, and you could still get out of it. Okay, this point is such an important point that when bad things happen to good people, why don't the good guys always win? This is something that causes a lot of people to leave the fold of the faith. One example we saw from the tractate of Chagiga 9 in Jerusalem Talmud, we saw there that Elisha ben Avuya, better known as Acher, another person, we don't even use his name, because he went off the track, OTD, off the derech. And what did he do? He saw two people. One person transgressed the commandment and nothing happened to him, and he saw another person perform a commandment, and then that person was killed. So the good guy who performed the commandment died, and the bad guy who did not perform the commandment got off scot-free. So that's what caused him, according to the Talmud, to go.
Everyone knows people talk about why bad people could bad things happen to good people. But also the same question is, why do good things happen to bad people? Here in Elisha ben Avuya, it's not just a bad thing happened to a good person, it's also that a good thing happened to a bad person. It's also a Hashem.
Good point. So it's a two whammy over there, right? Yeah. Okay. Now, so our question, of course, is that after we're so accustomed to the Hanukkah story of the underdog and the victory in the end, and it's so, it's such a great story, such a Hollywood, Broadway story. How could this be? 252 years later, after the original story, it turned out so wrong. It turned out so bad. The Jewish community was, hundreds of thousands of people were murdered during this time. So how could that be? We quoted a book from New York. It's called Lev Avraham. He writes in Lev Avraham that he asked the same question. How could it be that the commandment did not protect them? More so, how come that the sacrifice did not protect them? We know that in the Talmud, in Brachot, it tells us that if a person has self-sacrifice for God, for a commandment, God does miracles for that person. Not only here did no miracles happen, this wasn't like, I know there's Rocky 6, this wasn't Hanukkah 2. It was like bad news for the Jews over here. So Lev Avraham, he asked this question, how could it be that they, with all their tremendous sacrifice and willingness to give up their lives, why did they lose? Why were they destroyed, the community there? And he gives a very harsh answer. He says that because of the fact that they went against Jewish law. In such a case, when there's a danger to one's life, how much more so a community, when a person is not allowed to sacrifice oneself in such a circumstance. That would be considered to be committing suicide. So not only don't you get the points for the self-sacrifice, you lost out over here that you actually committed suicide because you went against the law of Torah. Okay. After that point, we're still on our summary here. After that point, we saw it's very unusual that the Lev Avraham would say such a thing because it's in black and white in so many sources in the Torah. We quoted from the Jerusalem Talmud of Sukkot on page 23, but it's in 5 or 6 other sources that people outside of Israel, you might say, oh, well, it's from the Jerusalem Talmud, not many people know those secrets, but no, you can't get away with that. It's in Esther Rabbah, it's in Eicha Rabbah, it's in the Megillah and other places. So it says straight out, three times in history, 3 times in the Torah, the Jewish people were warned not to go down to Egypt. So that means if you go down to Egypt to live, you transgress 3 commandments. According to some opinion, Maimonides would sign his name. I am Maimonides, the son of, I am Moshe, the son of Maimonides, who transgresses every single day 3 negative commandments of the Torah. That's how he would sign his name every time, I don't know how he would fit that name if he was signing a check. They give you like this, I have like a few names myself, and my kids have like 3 or 4 names. I don't know exactly how they fill that sucker in on that little line that they give you over there. But be that as it may, so 3 times in history. Number 1, during the time of the evil king of Assyria, Sancheriv, the Jewish king of Israel, Hoshea ben Elah, he took Jews down to Egypt. He tried to form some kind of pact, agreement with the Egyptians, even though he was warned by the prophet Isaiah not to do that. And the Talmud tells us that these 3 times that Jews went back to Egypt to settle down, they were wiped out. They were destroyed. They fell. So that's the first time. The second time was after the first temple was destroyed, in the days of Gedaliah ben Achikam. He was warned by some people, one of them being Yochanan ben Kareach, that a fellow Jew named Yishmael ben Netanya was after him. He was going to kill him. He didn't want to hear it. It was evil speech, Lashon Hara we call it, and therefore ignored the warning. Sure enough, though, Yishmael ben Netanya did blow him away. Now Yochanan was afraid, and he asked the prophet Yirmiyahu to ask God what to do. God said to Yirmiyahu, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't go down to Egypt with the Jewish people. He was fearful, and he went down. He said that Jeremiah was a liar. That was the second time. Third time in history was this time of Trajan and his wife Pampella, that the Jewish people went. There's an opinion that it was a little bit before that. They didn't just arrive in Egypt. Now, it was actually in the time of Onias the Fourth, or Chenyo, that set up a temple, a replica of the temple. I know in Germany in Germany today, maybe like 7-8 years ago, they set up a Western Wall in Germany. There's a Western Wall. So if you ever want to go to the Kotel, the Western Wall, so you don't have to come to the East Jerusalem, you could go to Germany and you have your Western Wall there. So he built up a temple, and he brought various vessels, replicas of what was in the temple. People, instead of going up to Jerusalem, once again, we're talking about the second temple period. The temple is up. People, instead of going up to Jerusalem, they would hang out in Egypt. So that was the third time, and they were destroyed by Trajan with encouragement of his wife, Pampella. Which is also interesting because according to this source, not only did the bad guys win, but there was a miracle that the trip, Trajan was busy in somewhere else in the world, and his wife sent him a message that instead of going far away and finding enemies that do or don't exist, underneath in your own backyard you have enemies, the Jewish people. They're here lighting candles, celebrating the fact that our son passed away. So what are you doing so far away from home? You have the 5th column right in your backyard. So it was a 10-day trip, which means he would have missed Hanukkah. But he did it in 5 days. God made a miracle. And can you imagine that? Like you're stuck in traffic and you're saying, oh God, please, like you did to Trajan, please give me that same miracle. I want to get home. Get me out of this traffic jam. Yeah, I don't know. For him it worked. For us, I don't know. We're still working on those. Okay, so we see very clearly that the Lev Avraham points out that the transgression was that they went against Jewish law. Now we know this. You could look in a lot of other previous classes that I've done. You could look it up on the real story of Hannah and her 7 sons. It's a 2 or 3 part series on that. We've spoke about it in different angles. There's definitely a place, we'll make it short, there's definitely a place for the heroic incident that the Jewish people of Egypt, of Alexandria, did not bow down to the Roman rule, and they lit those Hanukkah candles. There is plenty of place in Jewish law that what they did was 100% kosher and heroic. We'll just leave it at that, and you could check out those other classes where I discuss the subject of how how the 7 sons were allowed to commit suicide. They could have gotten out of it. Okay, so not only that, in the previous class, we also spoke about the fact that there were other transgressions that are brought down in various books. Number 1 is living in Egypt. That's a big one. 3 negative commandments. Number 2, they played sports on Shabbos. They desecrated the Sabbath. Number 3, there was a slap in the face to the land of Israel, to Jerusalem, the holy city, and the holy temple. This whole temple of Onias the fourth lasted for some 200 years, 220 years, lasted for 220 years. Amazing. According to Maimonides, this whole gig, all these people that were bringing all these Jews that were bringing sacrifices the punishment is karet. Karet means that you are excommunicated eternally. You could be excommunicated for a week, for a day, for, some people for a month. But here, it's also your share in the world to come. There are 3 types of excommunications we're not going to get into right now. There are 3 types. So this amazing thing. So this was a type of a return of the sin of the spies. The spies, we said, despise the land of Israel, as King David said in Psalms. Number 4 was that these communities celebrated the destruction of the Second Temple because of the fact that there were many Jews in Jerusalem, that when these people would go up to Jerusalem, they lived outside or close proximity to the land of Israel. When they would come to Jerusalem for holidays, they would be taken advantage by the Jerusalemites. And like a lot of times you have in places where there are tourists, many times you have bad people that take advantage of tourists because they're not familiar with the turf and how the country runs, and a lot of times they're taken advantage of. So this was the same story. So they cursed out the day that they went up to Jerusalem, and they were actually celebrating, it's hard to hear, but they celebrated the downfall of the Jews in Jerusalem and also the temple. So anyways, that's enough of sins that you have to go around, that can go around, to that we could explain why they were punished, even though they were doing a tremendous act of self-sacrifice. We can understand why they were punished. Okay, that was last week. Now, this is new. The bottom line is, in all these transgressions that we brought up, 4 or 5 of them, what's in it for us? What do we have to take from this? It's a very important point in life. Thing is that life is not all or nothing. Life is complicated. You have a person that they're in debt $1 million, and they come to the bank one day and they bring them $30,000 in cash. That's a lot of money to bring. That shows a goodwill to try to get rid of their debt. The bank, the head of the bank, the CEO, looks at the guy and says, "Listen, it's very nice of you to give us $30,000, but you owe $1 million. So therefore, whatever you brought to us, you know what I'm saying? I mean, of course, we'll take it, but you've not paid back your debt. We're going to go after you until you pay back that debt." So it's very good that the Jewish people in Alexandria in Egypt had self-sacrifice. They were willing to give up their lives. Of course, that has a lot of points for God and in heaven, etc., and also in this world. However, when you look at the entire situation of the Jewish people, then you have to look at the complete picture, not just one point. We like looking at one point. Oh, he was such a nice guy. Right, he was a nice guy. He did a lot of nice things. But we're purposely ignoring a million things that they did, which were horrible, which were terrible. Person has cancer in a certain part of the body, and it kills him eventually, even though 95% of his body was 100% healthy. But it was a little bit of cancer, but it killed him. So you can have a 95% healthy body and still die. And the beat goes on. You can keep on giving yourself, keep on giving yourself so many examples where Judaism, life, reality, it's not just for the moment. I'm now sacrificing myself and therefore I'm going to be protected, etc. No. There are times, there are situations where God looks at the person's slate, He looks at their entire record, and when God sees the entire record, this specific commandment, even though it's important, and even though He will be rewarded for this, He's still going to pay the price for his past, what was done in the past. You can't just, a guy gets up after killing somebody, from today on, I will not, harm anybody, I will not hurt a fly. That's very nice, it's a very good thing, don't hurt a fly from today on in. But buddy, you're going for 50 years in prison. So it's good that you're doing a good thing right now, accepting upon yourself not to lift up your hands even against flies, but that's not going to save you in the court of law. They're going to throw the books at you, rightfully so. Okay, so anyways, that's the idea, that the Jewish community of Alexandria, the reason why they were not successful here, was the fact that they had various transgressions. And after years and years of living there and building up the transgressions, time was out. Time was out. That the sand clock had run out of sand, and that is why they were punished, even though they were doing a tremendous commandment, which means, very simply, when it says in the Torah that a person that's partaking in a commandment or is a messenger to partake in a commandment, nothing bad will happen, that's 100% true. The reason why these people in Egypt lost, suffered, were annihilated, was because of the fact, not because of this commandment. They would have left this world in a different way. There would have been an earthquake, there would have been a fire, or a million other ways that God has to deal out justice. So it wasn't the commandment. The commandment itself did not cause them the damage at all. There was no damage because of that commandment. The opposite. They will receive reward, eternal reward for that. However, because of their deeds, because of their whole rap sheet, that's why they paid the price. So there is no contradiction to the point. Okay, now, our question today is, and this is an important question, did the good guys really lose? That's our angle today. Did the good guys really lose? Hey, what are you talking about, Yehuda? Seems clear as day. The entire community was annihilated. The synagogue was destroyed. They were killed inside the synagogue, as we read last week. What are you talking about? Ho, put on your seatbelts, or a few of them, because we're going for a ride. We're going to see if the good guys lost or the good guys won. Okay, take it from the top. There's a very colorful character in the Talmud. His name was Rabbi Yahshua ben Levi. Many stories about him. One of the famous stories about him is that he had a bout with the angel of death, and he kind of took his weapon of death away from the angel of death. He got his weapon away. Anyways, eventually, the Talmud tells us that Rabbi Yahshua ben Levi got a sneak peek, a trailer, I think they call it a trailer, of Gan Eden, of the world to come, paradise. And in fact, it might sound like what in the world is a Jewish law book discussing this, but this is in a Jewish law book called the Kolbo. The Kolbo, we do not know who wrote it. Out of humility, he did not write his name, but it's a famous Jewish law book. And in this Jewish law book, he discusses and tells us something very interesting. He tells us that in paradise, in the Garden of Eden, there are 7 special chambers where only certain people are allowed. So there's the main hall where people, the majority, the masses are. But then you have 7 special sanctuaries that only special people, the VIPs of the Jewish people throughout the ages. And in that 6th special sanctuary is only for people that died or were killed while performing a commandment or on their way to perform a commandment. The good guys did not lose. They won. Because this world passes us by. How long are you here for? 20 years, 30, some less, some more, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. This is a temporary world. Can't believe it. Think about it. Think about, wow, look how old I am. I remember when I was in high school. I remember when I was in elementary school. It's like yesterday. Wow, how did the time fly by? This is the purpose of the world. How many eggs did I eat in my life? How many restaurants did I go? How many vacations that's life? So we know that this is the beginning. This is the beginning of the journey. And the journey continues, just in a different form. When we leave the body, the soul continues on. So this is just the beginning of the journey here, very short compared to eternity. So folks, they did not lose. These holy souls in Egypt, when they gave their lives for the lighting of Hanukkah candles, men, women, and children, they have in the world to come, in paradise, the Garden of Eden, they have a special sanctuary. No one else is allowed in. No one else is allowed. Can you imagine? Sometimes you're in the bleachers or behind the foul pole. You can't see anything. It's true you're in the stadium, but you're thinking to yourself, man, why did I come out here? Maybe it was better to watch it on TV. I can't see anything with that foul pole. Or you get these seats, the cheap seats, and you can't see anything. So there's a lot of people in the Garden of Eden, but there's just 7 special sanctuaries. These must be the box seats, if you catch the drift. So anyways, that's number 1. The good guys actually won. Number 2, going on to Megillat Eliyahu, page 82. Megillat Eliyahu says the following, that these people in Egypt, the largest Jewish community at the time of the Second Temple in the year 117 CE, this Jewish community, they celebrated the downfall of the temple and Jerusalem because of what the Jerusalemites took advantage of them when they came up to Jerusalem during holidays or different times of the year. They celebrated. That is a terrible thing. To celebrate the downfall of God's sanctuary, God's holy temple. Are you out of your mind? There's always bad people. There's always bad apples. But you celebrate the fact that 1 million Jews were killed. Did 1 million Jews take advantage of you? There's a minority of people that took advantage of those, of people that came up to Jerusalem various times of the year. Okay, but that is a terrible sin. The Megillat Eliyahu goes further and says, because of this sin, so low to celebrate the destruction of God's house? If you have a neighbor, or if you turn on your computer and you hear somewhere in the world that was a fire and it took, somebody's house and furniture and belongings were destroyed, it hurts you. And that's just a person, you don't know who they are. They're someplace opposite side of the world. This is God's house. There's about 1 million Jews that were murdered here. So therefore, they were headed for Gehinnom. Their law was passed by God to go to hell. However, because of the fact that they sacrificed, listen closely, if you notice the Romans, when they left Jerusalem, their triumphant march into Rome, what do you see? Of all the vessels of the temple, you see the candelabrum, the menorah, where they light candles. That, more than anything else, represents the temple. Today, in the old city in Jerusalem, you go to the old city, you see one item of the temple, and that is the menorah, the candelabrum. That's what you see. One. That represents more than anything. So listen to this. The Jewish people understood their transgression, celebrating the destruction, so to speak, of the menorah, of the candles. So what did they do? They gave their lives for candles, not candles of the temple, but candles of Hanukkah. And this, says the Megillat Eliyahu, this saved them from the punishment of Gehinnom, of hell. The good guys won. Rav Yonatan Eifshitz, on his commentary on the Scroll of Esther, page 168, he quotes the Khatam Sofer. Khatam Sofer is from 200 years ago. 200 years ago. Listen closely. Beautiful piece. Number one, Khatam Sofer asks, Rav Yonatan Eifshitz quoting him, why in the world did Mordechai place himself in danger and the Jewish people by not bowing down to Haman? There were so many ways. There must be 50 ways to get out of bowing down to Haman. Mordechai was certain, says the Khatam Sofer, that if he sacrificed his life, one person, one righteous person, the Jewish people would be saved. On purpose, Mordechai goes, he understands there must be 50 ways to get out of it. He gets into it. He understood that if he sacrifices himself, the Jewish people will be saved. And he was willing to be knocked off to save the Jewish people. Number two, there's an unbelievable question that anybody and everybody asks. What in the world was on Esther's mind? Esther is in the month of Nisan, roughly month of April. The Jewish people will be destroyed according to the decree of Haman only in 11 months. What in the world is the rush? You got 11 months to make a plan, Stan. What is she going in? Not only that, she's going in after 3 days of fasting. There's some people, most people, after 3 hours of fasting, man, they look like they're about to die. Oh God, save me. Oh, where's that salami? Where are those hot dogs? Give them to me. 3 hours of fasting. Whoa, I can't do it anymore. 6 hours. Oh my God, I'm just lying in bed. Wake me up when it's over. Wake me up when it's over. 3 days of fasting, baby. Morning, afternoon, and night. 3 days. It's amazing. 72 hours. How do you look after you fasted 72 hours? You know what I'm saying? How does Esther look? Does she look like, wow, I like to be with this princess? You know, Achashverosh, she hasn't been called for 30 days. She's taken her life on her hands. A person is not allowed to go into the king if they have not been invited for 30 days. And it was 30 days for her. So what in the world is she doing? You've got another 11 months to save the Jewish people. Eat something, sit down, get yourself, do your hair, put on some Chanel perfume or something. Do something. No, she comes after the 3-day fast. She looks awful. What in the world is she doing? So too, Chatam Sofer says the same idea. Amazing. That she knew that if she sacrificed herself for the Jewish people would be saved. She would be killed, but it was worth it for the sake of saving the Jewish people.
So the miracle here was that they were saved without any one good guys dying, without her or Mordechai dying.
In that was a real miracle, because in the end, not only were they not touched, but they actually destroyed tens of thousands, 76,000 of the enemy. It's like, whoa. But that's why it's a holiday, you know. Not every time it works out like that. Okay, so the Chatam Sofer goes on. He says, you know what the whole story about Purim is? That the Jewish people were suffering, not because of the fact that they were under the rule of the Persians or the Babylonians. That wasn't the major bother of them. The major thing that hurt them was the fact that the temple was destroyed. And they wanted to build a temple. And they knew that the temple was actually about to be built again, and it was stopped by Cyprus the king for 18 years under the auspices of Cyprus and also Achashverosh, Esther's husband. That's what bothers them. Now, what does the temple represent for us? Temple represents sacrifice. Sacrifice. It's an amazing word. Yeah? Sacrifice. It's not just about animals. It's about ourselves. How are we sacrificing for the honor of God? So everything, if you look at the history of the Temple Mount, the history of the Temple Mount is Abraham and Isaac willing to give their lives, where? On Mount Moriah, where the Temple Mount would stand later in history. That is what it's all about. And that's why if you go away from God, how do you get close to God? You cause yourself to go far away from God. How do you come close? You come close by sacrificing, by korban, by sacrificing. So it's not just an animal. It's understanding, as Nachmanides says, whatever is being done to the animal should have been done to me because of my transgressions. And I am willing for that to happen to me. What I'm doing to the animal now, I understand that should really be happening to me, and I'm willing to accept that upon myself in order to come close to God. So Mordechai and Esther, they understood that what really hurt the Jewish people was the fact that the Temple was not being rebuilt. That was bothering them. So they knew the secret to rebuilding it would be sacrificing. That would bring the answer to the Jewish people. Now listen to this, amazing. Chatam Sofer, brought down by Rav Yonatan Eifshitz, says this amazing line. The sacrifice of the Jews of Egypt in the year 117 CE will bring about the rededication of the third temple. Like blows us away. An amazing statement by Chatam Sofer and Rav Yonatan Eifshitz, tremendous sages of the Jewish people. Understand, it's amazing. The foundation. You know, you look and you receive a present and you ask yourself, why did I receive this gift? And many times a person receives a gift because of somebody's hard work. You know, a person has an inheritance. What'd you do for that? Your father or your mother, baby, they worked for 25 years 25 years times 7-8 hours a day times 5 days a week. Do the math. So you're getting this gift. You're getting this present. Think about where in the world did that come from? It ain't from you. You don't deserve it. You have no hand in it. So, Chatam Sofer and Rabbi Yonatan Eivshitz tells an amazing thing, that the foundation and the rebuilding of the third temple will be in the merit of those so-called losers, those Hanukkah losers. They ain't no losers. They're winners. And that the temple the temple represents sacrifice. The temple will be rebuilt through self-sacrifice. And that's why what they did in Egypt was a tremendous assistance to the building of the foundation of the third temple. We should have it already in our day. Next, commentator the Yefeh Mareh, he writes on the tractate, he writes on Esther Rabbah, chapter 7, paragraph 13. Says an amazing thing. If the Jewish people would have not sinned by living in Egypt, nothing would have happened to them when they lit those candles. It's only because they had such a severe transgression living in Egypt. We said three negative commandments. Think about it. Would you like to visit Germany? Would you like to visit Poland? I mean, I know that there's kids that go, and I know that there are people there. But let me tell you something. If you're a Jew with pride, you're not going to those places. You're not going to step 1 foot on that contaminated land. The Jews of Spain, when they were thrown out of Spain, they called themselves, they invented a last name. Toledano. Toledo? No, we're not going back there. Person with pride, how can you walk? How can you step 1 foot in that country where the Jews, the Holocaust happened? Can't give them money by the fact that you're traveling there and you're living there and you're in hotels and you're buying food. And how can you do that? So folks, that was a pretty serious transgression. And then he brings proof. He brings proof. The Yefeh Mareh, he brings tremendous proof. The proof is that it says in Tractate Sanhedrin, page 103, side B, an amazing question. We know that in the time of the judges, as in, here come the judge, time of the judges, there was a terrible act that took place in the territory of Benjamin. There was this couple that it was getting late and they wanted to stop. They didn't want to travel at night. So they stopped. They went to stop in a village of the tribe belonging to the tribe of Benjamin. There, this woman was raped, and eventually from the terrible incident, she also passed away from her wounds. It was like a gang rape, but not just like 10 people, 13 people. It was like a community, a village. So the Jewish people called for justice, and the tribe of Benjamin did not listen. So the Jewish people said, we tried to bring them to justice, the people that participated. So right now we're going to go to war. So the Jewish people go out and fight against Benjamin for what they did. So they go out and fight against Benjamin, and the Jewish people lose first round, and they lose the second round. How many people did they lose in these rounds. 40,000 Jews, not in the tribe of Benjamin, found their death in these two battles. What in the world is going on? These people, these Jews are fighting they are fighting a holy war. They are fighting a ethical war against this terrible act by the tribe of Benjamin, nothing being done to the perpetrators. They all have a hand in it. And the good guys fall. So the Talmud asks the question, what's going on over here? And the Talmud answers an amazing answer. It's true, what they did to fight against the tribe of Benjamin was a great thing. However, because of the fact that at the same time when this incident happened to this woman, there was a statue of Micha that was going around and nobody opened their mouth, nobody protested, nobody complained. Nobody organized demonstrations to destroy that. They just let it slide. So the Talmud tells us, you know why 40,000 Jews paid a price? Because of the fact that they were willing to go to war and pay with their lives to help fellow human beings. But when it came to God's honor, idol worshiping, foreign statues of Micha, there were no Jews to be found. So, just like we've discussed this before, Yonah the prophet, Elijah the prophet, you got to combine the two. To be zealous also for the name of God and also for the Jewish people. Got to use both. So, that is why they fell. Now, check this out. Amazing. A commentary on Megillah, the Scrolls of Ta'anit, page 216 by Rabbi Yosef Bernstein. He asks a question I don't understand. Listen to this closely. When Haman was trying to choose a day to kill the Jewish people, to destroy the Jewish people, he went through the Jewish months. When he got to the month of Shvat, which is in about a month and a half from now, when he got to the month of Shvat, he saw that he could not overcome the Jewish people because there was a tremendous merit for the Jewish people in the month of Shvat. Why? Because on the 23rd day of Shvat, the Jewish people gathered together to fight against the tribe of Benjamin, who had murdered and raped this girl. So, Haman saw that because of this tremendous merit of the Jewish people to go out and fight and be willing to die for what happened to this woman, he said, I cannot overcome the Jewish people in the month of Shvat. Now this is problematic because we have another source. For example, in the Code of Jewish Law, 580, it says there are different days that we fast. One of them is the 23rd of Shvat. Hey, it's a holiday. The Jewish people went out to annihilate transgressors of Benjamin. It's a holiday. So to speak, it's a holiday. There's so much merit to that Haman was afraid to decree against the Jewish people in that month. The Jewish people, even though it happened hundreds and hundreds of years before that, the merit of that act still protected the Jewish people. Amazing. What you see today doesn't mean anything. We don't know the whole picture. We don't know what's going on behind closed doors. So he writes, got to make a decision here. Is it a fast day? Or is it a day full of merit for the Jewish people? And he says it's both. An amazing commentary by Rabbi Bornstein. He says that the reason why we fast is because of the Jews that fell. 40,000 Jews fell. On that we fast. However, it's a happy day because of the fact that because of their self-sacrifice and willingness to go out for a fellow Jew and fight, that was a tremendous merit for the Jewish people to protect them. It protected them in the time of Haman, which is hundreds and hundreds of years later. Just like amazing. Hundreds of years later, this happens, and still protecting the Jewish people. So the same story with the Jews of Alexandria. Why? Of course, we're saddened by the fact that they were destroyed. However, the merit of their willingness to sacrifice for God's commandments in every single generation, throughout the days and the months and the years, many Jews, communities, are being protected because of their merit. So the good guys actually won out. Going on further, the Shlah HaKadosh writes, Shlah HaKadosh has a commentary on the written Torah and also the oral Torah. So this is the written Torah, Vayeshev 52. He says an amazing thing, that in life there are all types of times. We know from Judaism, from Torah, we know that there are times during the year that a Jew has to be very, very careful. Why? Because this is a time of severe justice and retribution, and therefore you want to keep a low profile. There are times like that during the year. The other hand, we know that there are times where the Jews have the upper hand. Those are times where what's ruling the world is God's mercy and kindness, more so. So therefore, the Shlah HaKadosh tells us an amazing thing. You know these Jews that were destroyed, annihilated in Egypt by lighting candles? How could that be? It could be because during this time of history, this was a time of the destruction of the Second Temple. This was not a time of mercy and kindness. This was a time of retribution for the Jewish people for hundreds of years, what they were doing. So therefore, when you have this time in the world, just like there are weeks that you have to be very careful, keep a low profile. Don't do things that are perhaps going to endanger you. Whereas another time of the year, there would be no problem. So, in Egypt, God tells the Jewish people to put blood on the doorpost and not go outside. But I understand, if I put on blood on my doorpost and I walked outside, what's the problem? Problem is that right now, it is a time of tremendous judgment in the world. This was a time where God was every single month for an entire year, God was bringing his severe justice against not only the Egyptians, but also against the Jewish people, the wicked of the Jewish people. We know that 80% disappeared in Egypt. So this is a different type of time, where this is a different time of period in history. You got to know what period of time you're in. Which means the Shlah is telling us that if this was during a different period of history, they would have merited to see miracles. These Jews that lit the candles, they would have merited to see. They would have been merited to be saved. But this period of time was different rules. This was like the month of Av or the month of Tammuz. These are not good months for the Jewish people. This is the strict letter of law of God. Judgment of God is more prevalent in the world. So you have to take that into account. He says an amazing thing, the Shlah. He says the following. Do not think this terrible thing that happened to them is bad. It's actually good. Why? Because any of sins that they might have had, and we spoke about various sins, they became purified through their self-sacrifice and paying the tremendous price of their lives. They became purified. And therefore, they elevated themselves to a tremendous spiritual level of not only lighting physical material candles, but they are connected to the spiritual lighting of the menorah, the candelabrum, in the upper worlds. They are connected. They are one with the spiritual candles and lighting of the time of Hanukkah. So they saved themselves. They actually won because they had set transgressions and because of the fact that they paid the price for being Jewish and observing God's commandments. This cleansed them of any of their previous sins and brought them up to a tremendous elevation of being connected to the upper spiritual worlds of what we call Hanukkah. The Otzar Midrashim in Midrash Eser Galuyot, page 436. Listen to this. Talks about the life in Egypt. Tells us that from the times of Yochanan, this is the time of after the destruction of the first temple. So there was a 70-year period of time. So when Yochanan, the son of Kareach, came to Egypt, they settled in Alexandria, and they bought up fields, and they bought up vineyards, and they had tremendous amount of children. They were double the amount of people that left Egypt, which means we're talking about we're approximately 10 million Jews. And whoever did not see the Jewish community, the Jewish buildings in Alexandria, Egypt, has not seen beautiful buildings before. So the Jewish people, they found their paradise, so to speak. They found their land of Israel in the place in Egypt. And then he goes on. And then they set up priests to work. And they set up altars to serve and brought sacrifices and the incense and the showbread. And they were rich, tremendously rich. They had tremendous political power. And they had synagogues and study halls, and you could not count the amounts. Amazing thing. They were in Jerusalem, outside the land of Israel. They didn't need Jerusalem. They didn't need the land of Israel. And listen to what he says. Because of these sins, Trajan went up to Egypt and he killed all of them, and their blood became like a river. So we see here, once again, that do not think that the sacrifice of the Jews of Egypt caused them to be killed. No, it was their sins. This was a tremendous heroic act. This was a savior for them and the Jewish people. Why they were not successful, so to speak, now, here and now, in this world, in this framework, was because of these other transgressions, not the transgression, God forbid, of lighting. This was a savior for them. In Kohelet Rabbah 3:18, or in some versions it's 3:24. Listen to this. Our sages tell us that I will give you right now. They're giving us, we will give you right now a tradition to remember always. If you see somebody that performed a commandment close to the time that he was killed or died, that is a sign that the person's righteousness was missing one little point in order to make him complete. And the opposite, if you see somebody that before they passed away or were killed performed a transgression, this shows you that they were missing just one transgression to close out their account and be bankrupt. So it's an amazing thing. So we see these people, we see these tremendous souls, that God created a situation where they were missing one little link in order to be complete righteous souls. And that is why God orchestrated their death to be fulfilling a commandment. In our days, Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky, there's much more on this, but for now, just listen to this amazing thing. Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky asks, how come Sarah passed away when she heard the fact that her son Isaac was being sacrificed or about to be sacrificed on the Temple Mount? How could it be that a commandment of God, which God commanded Abraham to take Isaac, how could that cause the death of a righteous woman like Sarah? And listen to the words. He says, you know why it says in that verse in Chaye Sarah, you know why it says Chaye Sarah twice? Vayu Chaye Sarah. 127 years. Shnei Chaye Sarah. Why does it say twice? You know why? Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky, the leader of our generation, what does he say? An amazing lesson. He says, you know why? Because Sarah was going to pass away. This was her time to pass away. However, because she was so righteous, what God created was that he made the situation, he put all the players that she should die through a commandment. She should die through a commandment. Rabbi Yossi in the tractate of Shabbat 118, he says an amazing thing. He says, I pray God, please allow me to have a part of those Jews that die while performing or heading towards a commandment. I want to have a share in their lot. That's what Rabbi Yossi says, 118b on Shabbat. So Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky says an amazing thing, that these tremendously righteous people, what God does, he orchestrates it, that you leave the world through a sanctification, through a commandment. If the commandment did not harm you, the fact that Isaac was taken up to Mount Moriah and almost sacrificed, that's not what killed her. It was her time. But God wanted her to go out through the commandment have a share in the commandment of Abraham and Isaac. And Rav Chaim Kanievsky spoke in a synagogue about 4 or 5 years ago in Har Nof. How could it be that Jews praying in a synagogue in Har Nof, Arabs went in and blew 5 or 6 people away, killed 5 or 6 people. These people were in their prayer shawls. They were in their phylacteries, their tefillin. How could this be? He says the same idea. A mitzvah does not cause any damage. That's not why they paid their lives. That's not why they died, because of the fact that they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. No, their time was up. And instead of leaving this world through a heart attack or the regular means, being electrocuted or just dying of diseases, of cancer. So what God does to the righteous people is that he brings them to what Rabbi Yossi said, that I wish my lot, I want my portion to be with these people that leave the world through God, through performing a commandment of God. That's the greatness. So in this case, the good guys actually won out again. Happy Hanukkah to all.